We've heard it said before, that data is a dirty word, right? It's one of those things that we just kind of cringe when we hear it, right? Because we know there's work involved, right? There's no other way to do it. And so we're going to talk about progress monitoring today and where it fits. Now, if you were in my IEP session just a few minutes ago, and some of you weren't, but one of the things we talked about was parent involvement and making sure that we ask those open-ended questions and we find out what the parent wants to be included. One of the other residual effects of the Andrew case was that there has to be progress monitoring. It's really the only real evidence that we have that we've implemented the IEP. The IEP is it's a right that these students have. It's an entitlement, okay? And so we have to make sure that we're doing progress monitoring. So what is progress monitoring? Okay? It's an ongoing process of collecting and analyzing data that determines student progress towards specific skills or general outcomes outlined in the measurable annual goal. Now remember, we talked about baseline in the present level earlier, okay? We said for every skill deficit that we mention in the present level, we have to associate a percentage with it. And then when we write a goal, those things have to be linked, and they should be linked, so that we can work on those probes, and we can work on those skills, and we can take that data consistently as often as we say we're going to take it. And we can see the trend of whether or not the student is headed toward meeting that goal, or if we need to take a step back and adjust our instruction, or if we need to change the goal altogether. So progress monitoring has lots of things that we need to be doing for students, but it's mandated, okay? It's part of the outcome of the Andrew litigation that I said changed the way we do everything, okay? So progress monitoring is so vital to what we do, okay? So hopefully today we'll show you some things that will help you. It'll help you manage it. I think the State Department has taken steps in the right direction in order to make consistent language part of our being, because in the old days we were just left to do it however, and now we've got some real guidance there, and we'll give you a handout later. But progress monitoring, it's collecting and analyzing data, and it informs our instruction, and it tells us whether or not the kid is trending toward meeting the goal, if he's making progress. And that's a big piece of what we do as special education teachers. Okay? Now, regular ed teachers have to do it too. Tier 2, Tier 3, they're supposed to be doing this regularly. Okay? So it's not like you guys are being penalized or you have an extra layer of responsibility. The only problem is lots of times is with entitlement programs, there's lots of procedural errors that can be made, and there's lots of audit process, and there's lots of litigation that go around not providing FAPE, okay? So we need to make sure we understand that. The purpose is to close gaps, to inform teacher instructional decisions. It's for compliance. It provides legally required data for present levels. It's making sure that the annual goals are met and that we have access to the general curriculum. It also implies that student engagement is a part of their learning, and we involve family in student progress, okay, because we share that as often as we send report cards, okay? Any questions about that? So it's one of the 4 pieces of providing FAPE. FAPE is a free appropriate public education that all special education students are entitled to. If they're disabled, they have a disability that meets the criteria. If they need special design instruction, they have an adverse effect, then we have to progress monitor the goals, okay? Okay, so one of the things that has been introduced in the last, what do you say, 3 or 4 years, Brenda? How long's goal monitoring tab been in place? About 3 years?
About 3 years.
About 3 years, okay? So you've got a new tab in Infinite Campus, okay? You've got your IEP, You've got all those tabs, but you've got one that says Infinite Campus Goal Monitoring tab, okay? And it does a ton of the work for you. There's videos on KD's website that are readily available. There's a 32-minute video that Ashley Cook does. You remember Ashley that was in our mathematics meetings? But she does this progress monitoring video, and it teaches you about 3 types of data, okay? Every piece of data is going to turn into one of these 3 types, okay? You're either going to be doing a duration recording, an event recording, or a latency recording, okay? Brenda talked about it earlier in our session on IEP. And so, when we talk about duration recording, we need to understand what the definition of duration recording is, okay? We need to understand what an event recording is, and we need to understand what a latency is. But what we're saying to you is, those are the 3 types of data that you must turn anything that you do as a method of measurement into in order to make Infinite Campus Goal Monitoring correct. Now, here's one of the things that you have to know about this goal monitoring tab. In order to get it to work correctly, you have to determine what the baseline is first. So you have to have several probes and take an average of that probe. You're going to have 3, 4, 5, 6 data points or scores that you're going to take an average of, and you're going to input that baseline in. And that the only way it's going to work correctly is if you get that baseline in there and get it established. There's, like I said, there's videos on this at KD's website around progress monitoring. As we move on through that, though, the good news is, all you have to do is take a data point, a raw score, and input it after you get the baseline in. Let's say you're 20% on reading comprehension. You put those weekly data points in. So if you say, we're going to take data weekly, you're going to have a date that goes across the bottom of the graph that correlates to what you put in that. And you got to make sure that happens. You input that data weekly, or you do it twice weekly, or you do it twice monthly, or you do it monthly. The thing I'm going to say to you, though, is if you're doing a 4.5-week grade report, or you're doing a 9-week grade report, if you say you're going to take data monthly, your graph is not going to look very impressive, nor is it going to give you any trend data, okay? So I want you to think about that. The more trend data that you put in, the more it's going to predict whether or not the student is trending in the right direction. The more data you take, the more fidelity there is in that representation on that visual graph, okay? So, a duration recording is for behavior, okay? How long does a behavior last? When does it start and when does it end? If you take our progress monitoring or IEP goal progress monitoring, we've got websites you can go, you can find data sheets to help you and that kind of thing. But right now we're just thinking about the definition is duration means how long it lasts. So these are behaviors like the kid is calling out inappropriately, or the kid is running around the room, and you're trying to measure how long that lasts, and you're trying to decrease how long that lasts. Or the kid's just moaning, okay, behavior that you want to decrease, right? So a duration recording just simply looks at when it starts and when it ends, and you graph it, okay? And then you're doing special design instruction, you're doing behavior strategies to decrease that negative behavior and make a positive behavior take its place. And so that's one type of data. And that sheet, and we give you that sheet, or we have that sheet to give you. The next one is event recording. This is the one that you're going to work with the most. Academics, behavior, adaptive behavior. So academics are going to be working, like you're doing reading comprehension, or you're doing reading fluency. How many words can a kid read? You're going to turn that into a percentage. If a kid's supposed to be reading 100 words on the 2nd grade level in a minute, okay? and he gets 20 of those, 20%, right? That's what it is. And when you take another probe and you do another minute recording of that, he gets 23%, right? You turn it in a percent. He gets 23 words out of 100. Okay, you turn it into a percentage. So everything you do, if you have a checklist, you say you're going to do a checklist for a writing prompt. Eventually, you're still going to turn that information into a event recording, because how much of that, what you're wanting to measure is how much of that checklist the student gets right. Okay, and when you do that, you've got to turn that into an event recording. Okay, so that's the only type of data. Those are two of the three that the goal monitoring tab will allow you to input. Okay, you have to decide if I'm going to do it in minutes or I'm going to do it in seconds and that kind of thing. It's pretty straightforward. You're going to do it in minutes, all right? And you're going to turn it into an event recording. Okay, the last one is latency. Anybody have any idea what latency means? This is a behavioral term as well. All these terms actually come from the behavior side of things. But latency is you give a student a prompt and you measure how long the student takes to get started. Okay? So you have the task analyzed and you operationally define what that's going to look like. But what you're saying is, I'm going to prompt the student. I'm going to give them a sentence start. I'm going to give them some type of command, and they're having trouble getting started. Okay, so we're going to measure how long it takes them to get started from the time we end the prompt till they actually begin with the activity or the lesson or the problem or whatever it might be. So those are the three types of data. Okay, all right. I'm going to turn it over to Dionne, let her take you through this slide right here.
All right, so I'll get over here and we'll start talking about collecting data, and then we're going to talk about, in just a second, we're going to do some actual practice of what that looks like and how that's going to work. But for collecting data, we want to make sure that our progress monitoring, we start by establishing a baseline. So we have to calculate and figure what a baseline is. And so, to know what to write in the present level. Sometimes we'll get back those consolidated reports or those written reports, and they'll have some data in them, but that doesn't necessarily give us all the information we need to know about where that student's at. So there is some things that we have to do is to figure out what that baseline data is. Once we figure out that baseline data, then we have to use that in that measurable goal. So for baseline, we have to be able to calculate, and it's not just that one instance, but we're going to have to figure out an average or a range for that performance. And so we'll practice that in just a second. But you see, we have to know, so the consolidated report and all the things that we have don't always give us all the answers. Sometimes it takes us a little bit more work to dig down in there and get that baseline data, because that's what drives our goal. We don't know how to write a goal in reading if we don't know where that student's performing at, or whatever that skill is we're working on. We don't know what that is unless we dig down in there and really figure out what the area they need to work on, and then we figure out where they're at. Like sometimes you get like a star reading assessment, and it'll tell you they're on the second grade level, 2.1, and that's the second grade level on the first month. But we have to dig in there and see what is it exactly that they're reporting on. If we're measuring what their fluency is, how many words correct per minute, so we're going to have to figure that out, right? And that'll be our baseline. And then we're going to look to see how we're going to move them, how we can calculate what we're going to move, because we have to know where to start in order to know where we're going. So once we use that, if we establish that baseline, we establish those goals, and then we check progress. And it's important that we use the same tool to check progress along the way as we did to establish that baseline, right? Because if you don't, you're getting two different measures, and they really don't give us the answer of what we're looking for. So that makes it important, and that's easy to happen if we don't have a good handle on what our tools are, what our recording tools are, or what we're going to use to collect our data. So that's why we're going to spend a little bit more time figuring that out today, because it's important that we know that. And so the last one is the method of measurement. It's got to be practical, and it's got to be able to yield information that we can easily analyze. And so we were talking about, let me give you an example. we were talking about if we had a reading passage, if we were checking to see how well students done on multisyllabic words. So they're looking at how many words they can read that have multiple syllables. And so if I had to do that, I would have to have a reading passage every time that had multisyllabic words in it. So I would have to have 4, if I say 3 out of 4 trials, then I'm gonna have to have 4 of those passages, which means as me as a teacher, I'm gonna have to go find 4 passages that has 10 or more multisyllabic words. But I don't know about y'all, but it'd probably take a little time for me to do that, and I don't know that I would have enough time to do that. So what I might do then would shift, instead of doing a reading passage every time, that might be a checklist that I would use, right? That had a list of multisyllabic words. And so every time that I gave them a trial on it, then I could count. You know, I might say, did they get 4 out of 10, 6 out of 10, 8 out of 10? But it's got to be something that I can use and measure. Otherwise, I would be spending all my time trying to find reading passages that had multisyllabic words in them. And so that's what we mean by that. You got to get something that you can use that's quick, that's a correct measure, that really gets to what that you're trying to measure.
And you know, Dionne, you guys are going to get reports, integrated reports. They're going to have scores in them. They're going to have IQ scores. They're going to have Wyatt scores. That's an achievement test that measures their reading ability, their math ability, their writing ability. You're going to get a Vineland report that's going to talk about their adaptive communication, their socialization, their daily living. And you're going to have to synthesize all the information. But one thing you got to realize is those numbers that go in that report are not the types of numbers that can be progress monitored. You don't give a Wyatt every week, or you don't give it twice a month, you see? So your method of measurement has to be one of those that, where you're probing these kids and you're actually working with that skill, that's something that you can give consistently. So whatever you determine the baseline with, you continue to use that same method of measurement throughout the entire IEP cycle.
And whatever that method of measurement is, you don't want it to be lengthy. These things can be 1-2 minute. That's it. And that's what you want. You want quick stuff. If not, you're going to be all day trying to progress monitor your kids.
And 2, we talked about explicit, I'm sorry, I didn't interrupt you. We talked about in explicit instruction this morning how to embed a lot of response from your kids, right? So if you're doing good explicit instruction models of teaching, you should be getting tons of data. You're getting tons of response. You can take data from response, right? You have to intentionally design your lessons so that they meet the goals, and that the SDI is something a little bit different in a little bit different way. It might have to hit a different type of mode, or the design has to be in such a way that it's going to give you the data that you need to get to see if the kid's making any progress on that particular skill. This must be a good slide because it was in the other presentation.
Yeah, so yeah, this slide here is really, this is what we're looking at tonight. I don't know if I'm going to push the right button. Yeah, so when we're looking at an IEP example, and so that was where we were having that conversation the other day about figuring out what those multisyllabic words are. So if we don't have some way of, like I said, if we have to keep pulling passages and passages and passages, it's going to take all of our time. But if we go over here and we have this IEP and we are looking at what though happens in that present level, we have all those pieces. I know you all talked about that for those of you that were in the earlier one. You have to have those strength, need, baseline data, and then you have to have an adverse effect statement. But right here, we calculated the baseline for this student performance on multisyllabic words at 46%. So whatever happens here, we've got that baseline established. That's what we're going to do to write a goal for that child, right? So that right there is directly related to that goal. And it's directly related to that method of measurement. So we have to, whatever we have here should completely connect to this and make sense. Sometimes we'll say that we got a reading assessment and they're reading at the third grade level, 3.2, third grade level, the second month, right? That doesn't tell us what skill are they working on. That just tells us what their reading level is. So we have to figure out where they're at. What is it, the skill that they need to work on? Is it comprehension? Is it fluency? We have to figure out what we're working on, and then we have to establish a baseline here, and then we write a goal, and then we got to figure out what we're measuring them on, and then we have to know how to measure that. So it's a big process, but once you learn how to do that, it becomes quicker for you, and it's not so difficult, because once you figure out what are those things that you need to work on, it makes it easier. But again, it's gotta be something you can manage.
Right, and Dionne, remember that the present levels are just that. You've gotta think about that purpose is to let us know where that kid is currently functioning. Okay, so there's things like instructional level and independent level. If the kid can get 90% of the benchmark words on the first grade level consistently, 3 out of 4, and he can transfer it down the hall, that's independence. And so we would move to the second grade and probe that student on his instructional level. Then you get it, you say, oh, he's only getting 30%, or what was it, 46%?
46%.
47% or whatever it was here. And so that's where we're going to see growth, okay? That's what we're going to see. We're going to write ambitious goals. We're going to look at those words, those verbs that we use, and ramp up that rigor to get that student a little closer to grade level expectation, okay? So that's the whole point of this.
So we talk about that, he's got a fourth grade, on the fourth grade instructional level, we're looking at a 70% goal over the course of that year, what would be reasonably calculated, that was ambitious, and we push that student. So if he's at 46, we're gonna try to aim for 70%. We want a 70% accuracy by the end of that year. And we're monitoring to see how well along that we do, right?
Yeah. And you might ask yourself, how do we know how far they're gonna go, okay? You have to look at the disability and the impact of the disability. How the disability is adversely affecting the performance and what the rate of learning might be. And kind of calculate, kind of in your mind say, well, I think it would be fair to say that this student can get to this point. He's an MMD student, it's going to be a little slower. Or he's an LD student, we might be able to give support and build some scaffolding in. He may have some other skills that we can accentuate, and we can get him a little further, 80, 90, right?
So, anything else on that one you
No,
want
I
to share?
think we're good. Just understanding that if you're doing a checklist in your method of measurement and you embed that in your goal, it eventually is going to turn into that event recording, okay? It's going to turn into a percentage. Don't be scared of that, because that goal monitoring tab is wonderful, okay? It does the work for you. It used to take me days to just get an Excel spreadsheet to compute or design a graph for me, okay?
So we're talking about that adverse effect, and that's the last piece of the 4 pieces that you have to have in that present levels, is that you have to talk about how that child's disability impacts their progress in the general curriculum. And we have to be able to, not only do we have to be able to collect progress monitoring data, but we have to be able to analyze that data to understand what that effect is on that student. If we use that, because we have to know, just because they're not reading at grade level, what does that mean? How does that adversely impact their education? So if they can't read at grade level, they're gonna have trouble being able to have access to the reading material, right? So all of those things impact students, and this helps us to understand that.
Now, I gotta point out something. You guys, how many were in the IEP session earlier? Bunch of, do you remember those boxes? None of them had that pretty stuff in it. Okay, that's her. All right, that's not me. See this little check there? I don't know how to do that. Okay, so she pretties the stuff up. So I was like, where did those question marks come from? I didn't see that. That's cool. Good.
Okay. So anyway, we're talking about using that data and how we calculate that rate of progress. That's what Nicole was just talking about. And then we're talking about, we have to do that, and it's all connected back to those goals. And then using the data helps us understand if what we're teaching is working for kids. And so what we don't want to happen is we teach for 6 or 8 weeks or 12 weeks, or we get to Christmas break and we say, this is probably not making any progress on this, right? We don't want that to happen. We want to have some data points, and we want to say, okay, after 6 or 8 data points, is what we're doing working? Because if it's not, it's time to change it, right? What's the Einstein's definition of insanity? Is doing the same thing over and over and expecting different results. So that's just the same thing we're doing with teaching, is if we're doing the same thing and we're not getting any, that we're looking at not the rate of improvement, or we're not seeing how they're progressing, we got to change it. And so this gives us a clue early on, so that we don't spend a lot of time teaching things that we don't need to be teaching.
And Brenda knows this compliance inside out and upside down. Brenda, tell them when you make an instructional change in SDI, what that means for an ARC meeting.
Okay, yeah, because when you change something, you have to let the parents know what you're doing, Okay, so you have these progress reports that go home, and you know, you can talk to the parents about that part. But talking about the ARC meeting, you have to make sure that everybody knows what everybody knows. I mean, we need to know that we have to change instruction. Other teachers, you know, may be counting on your stuff, and if it don't work for you, it ain't gonna work for them either. So, you know, you have to try to work together so that you can come up with the best practice for that child.
So changing SDI might not mean an ARC meeting, but certainly a call and to keep that in your parent contacts. If you change services or the amount of time, or if you change a goal entirely, that means an ARC meeting, okay?
So that's the reason why we want you to make your goal more realistic, depending on your child. Remember, this is individualized. So when she's had that goal up there, 46, and she's trying to get them to 70, you know, so they're looking at that particular kid saying, okay, we really feel that this child can get to 70. Some of them may not get to 70, they may get to 60. So you have to look at that. And like Denny Paul said earlier in the other session, 80%, a lot of people want to put that 80%, but you really don't have to. Remember, it's individualized for that particular child.
Back to that, and I'll flip on. So, we have to think about how we use data and why we're using that data. And I'm gonna click on over and we're gonna use some examples of this. And then here's that goal monitoring that Dionne already covered in this handout that you got on Infinite Campus. This is talking about, you know, how are we gonna do this? What are we gonna have? We gotta have some probes, we gotta have data points, and then this gives us just a little bit of the information about that process. This is a live link to that goal monitoring resources on KDE's. Is that what you're gonna say? That's the live link to the goal monitoring resources on KDE's website, and there's a video like you were talking about that had the how to use that and that progress monitoring pieces.
And remember when we were talking earlier about KDE's IEP guidance document, there's a whole section on progress monitoring, and it'll have the same information in what you have to have on your goal, on your graph. And these things are required, okay? These things are required. It's a big piece of what you do, okay?
So, and then we've talked through this a little bit about the goal monitoring and how we establish baseline. So we're gonna move on over it, and we're gonna give you some chance to practice so that you guys get into that. So we're gonna start with the behavior goal. And so we have Karen, so Karen's got a behavior goal. And Karen, when she's got a task or we give Karen some directions, she's having a little trouble getting started on her task. She's over there and she's a little off task, and so we're trying to get Karen to get on task a little bit more. So we know that she's diverting, she's sharpening her pencil, or she don't have her materials ready. She's just struggling with that, right? Because we have kids. Y'all probably don't have any kids. All yours stay on task, right? Yeah. So we're going to try to get Karen within a minute to have her materials ready and be ready to start class. So that's our goal. So we're going to say that on 8 out of 10 trials, and we're going to use a latency recording 3 times a week. So 3 times a week, we're going to check to see how Karen's doing on this goal that we're working with. Now remember, we're still working with her on getting organized, getting her materials ready, coming to class prepared, and that's what we're working on, right? That we're organizing her and getting her ready to begin tasks. So we're teaching along the way, but 3 times a week, we're going to check it and say, well, let's see how she's doing. How many minutes is it taking her? So we started out and we established a baseline. So we did some little checks and to see how many minutes it took her to get started. So what we found out after we did 3 or 4 probes with that is that we added them up and averaged them together. It's taken her 4 minutes to get started. Again, she's lost her pencil, she don't have her book, she don't have her stuff, she's a mess, she's on her phone, right? So we've got Karen having these issues, and we know when we figured it up, it's taking her about 4 minutes. So we're going to change that behavior. We want to think about, okay, we've got to change that behavior, because that's a long time. You think about if she was 4 minutes every single class and she had 6 classes, she's losing 24 minutes a day of instruction because she's fumbling around with her stuff. All right, so then, especially as a teacher, so we have to figure out, we have to record that some way. We have to catch that data, we have to time it, and we're going to have to write that down and figure out how many minutes it's taken. So we want her to get busy, and we're gonna have to calculate that. So we're gonna have to calculate that. We're gonna look at how much time, how many minutes it is, and then how we're gonna figure that out. So we have to have our form, because we gotta have something to write it down on. It don't have to be fancy form, but this is just a little bit of this tells you how many trials, so you're gonna, how many times. We write down the time when we give her instruction, and then how long it takes her to get started. So here's an example of this. So this one would be one that we would collected. So there's 3 on this page. So this is day 1. So this is November the 2nd. So November the 2nd, we started at 11 o'clock. And the teacher gives her the task at 11 o'clock. And we're counting minutes. So we're timing that to see how many minutes for her to get started. So this one it was 11:03 when she got started. Okay, so she finally got herself together and got started. All right, we looked again, because we're looking at multiple trials, right? So again, now she had another prompt to do something else at 11:10. Took her 3 more minutes. Okay, by 11:20, she had 3 more minutes. Because we're checking her, right? We're just checking those every time in that class period. So we're looking during that class period about how many minutes every time a teacher gives her a task to get prompted on that. So we look, so sometimes, it took her 4 minutes on this one, then a minute. So we've got a whole lot, but look here, by 12:30, it took her 8 minutes to get started. She probably run out of steam, or she had a hot mess on her desk, right? Right, something's going on with her that there's a greater delay. It might have been the shift of an activity, but that'll give you a sign of what's going on with that student. So from that 11 o'clock to 12:30, we did 10 trials, right? We checked her 10 times. Every time the teacher gave them a prompt, we waited and see how long it took them. All right, so next day, during that class, we have this reading block or a math block, or whatever it is we're checking. And we're looking, so we do the same thing. Yeah, it's a language arts class. So at 11 o'clock, we see how long it takes her to get started, all the way down to 12:30. So we're looking for 10 trials. We're trying it again. Okay? We look on the next day, and we're on November the 4th, the next day, the same block of time, we're checking to see how well she's doing. And again, remember, we're probably maybe giving her visual prompts, we're giving her verbal reminders, we're helping her get her organization, because we're still providing that SDI and working on that goal. So we're not just checking her without teaching her, right? Because we're teaching her, we're prompting, we're supporting, we're giving her those supports. All right, so let's look again. All right, the next day, we did the same block of time. Look here, 7 minutes this day. So that was a little longer. So those things are standing out. You may know why. It may be when you're first getting started again. She don't have that pencil, there's something going on. So the next day is the same thing. We look at the same time, then we collect how many minutes. Again, we just keep a little stopwatch there in our latency recording form. It's as simple as that. Then again here, on the next day, right, same thing. So how many data points did we have? Yeah, we had 3 sheets that had 10, yeah, and then we had another 3 sheets that had 10. So we've got a lot of time here. Here's another day. So right here's 9 days in a row that we've collected data. What we do right here is what's that data going to do us any good? We've got to figure out if we've got the data and those data points, we have to figure out what it's telling us. So we have to analyze it. So a lot of times we'll collect the data and we'll get those percentages, but then when we go back, we don't have look down in there to explain why we think that was happening. So in this example, we started out, and see this one, we got an aim line that goes down because we want to decrease that behavior, right? It's a behavior, so we want it to decrease. We don't want her to take as long, we want her to get quicker at it, right? Because we're teaching her and we're working with her to get better. So we started out, and it took us, took her, right here, she was 4 minutes, there's our baseline. So every data point that we had, you can see it dropped. It's 3.1 minutes, 2.2, 3.0, 3.9. And we calculate that because we added those up, right? And we figured out the number of minutes and how much time she was taking to get through those. So we can't just stop at putting those data points on there because we got to look, what's going on? Well, one thing I can see is right here, we think it's going down, but then it jumps right back up. And then it goes way back up. Then it goes down. So what this is telling me, then it's right back up. And so by then, I've already got, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, 6 data points. At 6 data points, I know that it's not stable. Whatever we're doing, there's a lot of variability. It's going up and then going down. So it's probably not really working for her. So whatever skill or strategy that I'm working on might not be the best one. And just like Brenda said, we're individualizing for that student. So whatever we were using the first time might not have been the best thing. So we got 6 data points. Now, we're gonna do a self-monitoring checklist. So we're gonna change what we're doing with her. We're gonna put her in charge of that. So she gets a little checklist, we teach her how to use it, and she's gotta monitor. Do I have my pencil? Do I have my paper? Do I have my graphic organizer? Do I have my calculator? Do I have my number line? Do I have all my resources that I need, right? So we give her then this monitoring checklist. Then what do you see happens? Right? She gets a little better on task. So I've got the data to prove it. Right, so it starts trending down. So I've got to talk about that. So once we changed that to that self-monitoring checklist, what happened? Well, it was showing that, on November the 12th, I started using that checklist with her, and she starts decreasing. We started using we use that strategy, and we're saying that she's making progress toward her goal. And I can explain it, right? So if I go to an ARC meeting and I'm talking to a parent, or I'm in a teacher conference and I want to go talk about student success and how well they're doing towards their IEP goal, I can talk that, right? Because not only do I just have data points, I understand what happened, and I can convey that to a parent or other teachers. So let's say I'm a special ed teacher and I'm Karen's teacher, and I are working together, and you can say, okay, once Karen started using this checklist, she's getting on task better. So Karen needs to use this self-monitoring checklist for all of her classes. It's helping her.
And it's this kind of thing that you should be sending to your parents in a progress report. It's that analysis. Those subtle changes in the SDI. Remember, it's intentional. It's what's directed at that goal. Okay? So keep in mind that it's not just sending yes and no, they're making progress. It's really telling what happened. And in order to really do that with fidelity, you've got to have data. You see this data representation here. Okay? So, and that's what Brenda was talking about as well.
And so Brenda and Dionne come and they look at folders, and a lot of times what happens is when they look at those due process folders and you get the progress and monitoring part, and you say, is all those pieces there? Well, it says both there has to be a graph, but there has to be a written analysis of data. So it's not compliant if you don't have both pieces. So we get to one piece or the other sometimes, but we don't have both pieces, and we have to have both of those. So that's just to help you. Now I will say this right here, because I know when we have the same kind of thing right here is when we have kids that were in that child fund and they're trying to make a referral for special ed. Regular ed teachers have to do these same kind of things when they're doing this through interventions. They need to be collecting data, and they need some graphs like this. You need to, this as a special ed teacher, when you're going into a referral meeting, you need to know how well this kid's been doing and what the teacher's done in that classroom. So that's an important thing to know too, because this will help drive whether, this will be the data you need for if you're taking a referral for that kid and you have an ARC meeting. So anyway, that's what it looks like for behavior. Because we always wondered, what's it supposed to look like for behavior? How in the world do I progress monitor that? So we identify what specific skill that kid's going to work on, we identify what we're going to work on, and then we check them all along the way. Any questions on that one? All right, so we're going to do a read goal now. And I'm going to give you all one of these right here, and we're going to practice some here with this. Here, give y'all. We'll do y'all. So Dionne's going to bring you a sheet around, and we're going to practice. So this one, we know that fluency is an issue for Karen. So Karen's got a little behavior trouble. She's got a little issue with reading. She's got a little comprehension, fluency trouble. So we know we need Karen to read words correct per minute. So we're going to be working with Karen on correctly reading words per minute. So we're going to be working on fluency with Karen. And fluency is one of the easiest ones to start with. But part of that is we got to know then how well that Karen's doing. So we know that that's one of the issues that she's got to work on. And then we're going to do that. We're going to practice this. So in here, we're going to practice this. And I'm going to let you all practice scoring. So I'm going to read a passage, because this is what we said we're going to do. We said that Karen's going to read 195 words a minute across 3 consecutive probe sessions. We're going to use an oral reading fluency probe, or curriculum-based measure. That's what I got right here. That's what y'all just got. This kind of, you can get them Intervention Central, you can get them from the Dibbles, from that down there at the University of Oregon. It's right down the bottom. You can have this page right here. But so I'll go pull this because this is a oral reading fluency probe, so I'm gonna get it based on whatever grade level that she's on. This one's a 5th grade one. And so I'm gonna check to see how well Karen's doing. Now, Karen started out reading about 105 correct words per minute. So when you're calculating 105, if you all ever use these probes, over here at the end of the line, when you come across, it tells you how many words in each sentence. But when you're checking a student, and it takes 1 minute, you can do a probe in 1 minute for a reading fluency. But you're going to listen to them read, and then if you have an error, if they make an error on what they read, you're going to draw a line on that word. So let's say if I miss one of these words, like beginning, I'm going to mark an error. I'm just going to mark a line on it. And that way, I know that that was a mistake, right, one that we missed. If I have a kid that messes up on a word and then corrects it, then I might write above it SC. That means they self-corrected. So I know they messed up a little bit on it, but they got it right. So that helps me also know about their accuracy and what words they're stumbling on. Because then I can look at it and see what kind of words that they're stumbling on all the time. Is it compound words? Is it words that have certain kinds of endings or prefixes and suffixes? If it's root words and affixes. So there's different things that I can learn. So I'm going to let you guys practice it, and I'm going to read a passage. I'm going to be Karen. I need somebody to time me for 1 minute. Somebody want to time me? So I'm going to read a passage, and I want you all to score based on my reading. So and then I'm going to let you all calculate what that looks like, because you're going to be able to read it and calculate how many words I've read. You're going to be able to how many errors I make, and then how many words correct. So your job, you got a 1 minute probe, you're progress monitoring the student, and you tell me when to start. Start. Eating contest. At the beginning of every summer, my big family has a corn eating contest. My mom and aunts go to the supermarket and buy tons of corn to rast and slope with butter and salt. My brother, sisters, cousins, grandparents, and everyone gather with their eyes glowing and their stomachs rambling. A couple of big picnic tables, we can see who stuff their faces fastest. I hate this addition. Okay. Mark right there. So you're going to put a mark at wherever I was at. Now, go back and count how many total words that I read in a minute.
So if you added a word or?
Yeah, if you added a word, you can just put a little, you make a little mark that looks like a little up arrow if I added a word right there. You can add that.
Additions, omissions.
Yep.
Deletions, substitutions, incorrect. All of them are errors,
They were all errors, yeah.
as far as fluency is concerned.
Right. So then, and so you can go, it's a quick check, if you go by the number of words on each one, and then you just can deduct them. So you have to calculate this thing. You have to calculate the total words read, how many errors I made, and then how many words I got correct. So you're gonna be counting, you're gonna calculate a score for me on that. Well, if you would want a fresh read as you're working on this. Yeah, and these you can generate tons of those, and these are pretty easy to get, but you would want to pull, you can do a fresh read when you're doing it.
Intervention Central has a probe generator, and you can input your own, and it'll create it for you.
Yeah. Yeah.
It's pretty neat, it's pretty nice. Yeah, Intervention Central.
Yeah, that's a handy thing. And so you might check these once a week, you're gonna be checking fluency, so you might check it once a week, whatever you have in your goal.
You can take the vocabulary out of the standard that you're working on and make your own.
You could.
So at this
You do it that
point, you took a couple words you didn't even know.
Okay, so I skipped them, right?
Right.
Yep.
Have those
So you-
red?
No, you just put your little arrow mark in there, or mark it in there that I omitted one. You can put an O, so you know I omitted a word or I added a word. And different probes have a little different way to score them, but you mark that, just as long as you capture the number that I got incorrect. So does anybody know how many total number of words I read? How many? So I read a total of 70 words, okay? Has everybody got that about where I was at? Because you can look on there and see wherever I stopped at. What I get to tradition, so I got to the word tradition, and so there's 72 at the end of that, so I take off I, and I, so that makes me 70. So I got 70 words I read in that 1 minute probe. All right, how many mistakes did I make? 11? Okay, did anybody else got about, what do y'all, anybody else get a different number? 9, okay. 7, okay. So probably when I left out a word, you could add that to the errors. Or if I added a word, you could add that to the errors. So let's say overall I made a total of 11 errors, okay? So how many words did I read correct? So I read 59. Okay, is that where I need to be going? Probably not, right? Because remember, I'm shooting for, what, 195. So I didn't do so good on that, right? So I didn't do so well on that reading problem. But that's how you collect that data. So if you're saying that we're going to check that once a week, I'm going to be teaching her fluency. I'm going to be teaching phrases. I'm going to be teaching some strategies for fluency.
So I have a question.
Yeah.
Just because I'm trying, across 3 consecutive probe sessions, so you would do this consecutive day, or you mean consecutively, because they're going to be fatigued?
Yeah, so,
Would you do 3 different paragraphs, like one right after the other, when you say across 3 consecutive probe sessions, or you're just saying days, 3 different days in a row?
so, okay, you want to answer that or go?
You want to be able to do that consistently, those 3 consecutive, okay? So you could, if you needed data quick and you were trying to establish a baseline, you could do those 3 consecutive, and you'd start looking for an outlier. There's this thing called mean and median, right? So if you got an outlier score, you can throw that out. There's lots of chance if you do it real close together, there's going to be an outlier. So you do that to kind of establish what percentage you are. So to answer your question, you can do it either way, just depending on what the individual need of the student is and what's going to fit what you're trying to accomplish. Is it baseline or is it a data point?
So you could use the same thing to establish baseline. You would give them 3 or 4, you would give them 4. You're looking for those consecutive. So you can do that and calculate a
The
baseline.
reason we put 3 out of 4 trials is we want to see if it's sticky, okay? We want to see if it's going to transfer. If it's going to be something the student just does one time, it's not near as solid, right? If they do it 3 out of 4 times consistently, then it's going to be something that we can, that's a great question.
It is a good question.
Yes.
It is.
Can you go back to that for a second, just real quick? I don't know how much time we have, but one of the things I want to point out is, if we said in the goal we were doing it on a 5th grade level, what is the implied independent reading level fluency? Based on what we learned this morning. What would be this student's independent level? 4th, right? We're going to back up 1, okay? And we didn't go ahead and say here 5th grade instructional level, but that's what we're meaning. The other thing is we're going to need to know, when we do reading fluency passages, we're going to need to know what the benchmark is for that grade level, okay? So we're going to need that, and we're going to need to be able to turn whatever you did into a percentage. So if you're supposed to get 150 and you're only doing 75 of them, then we know we're at 50, or whatever. We're at 50%, right? Or whatever, so.
Now, we're going to talk through that one because we don't have about 9 minutes left. But so each week, I might do this weekly. It depends on how I've written that. And if it's, if we're saying that a couple times a week, we're going to check our fluency. But each time we check, we're going to use a passage. And you can see we're going to do the same thing. We're going to look at the total correct words per minute. And we're going to do that each week, right? So I have the samples. So I'm going to look to see how well we've done each week, each time I use this probe. And I'm just saying weekly for this example. Then I get to the analysis of data, right? So I've got those data points. I've been given those. And so each time I do a little check, I got to the baseline. The first time when I checked Karen, she was at 105 words. Well, then, so that I make my mark for the baseline. So now I'm going to graph this. So the next thing I've got to do then is look at my goal. I'm aiming towards 195, because you gotta know where you're going to see kind of how well we're doing. So that's my aim line. Now, so the first time that I did the words correct per minute, she got 121. Okay, and I'm gonna move a little quickly. Next time she was 119. Third time it was 120. And the next time, okay, so I got there and I thought, well, let's look. We're not making any progress. Actually, we're going backwards. So let's see what we're doing. So maybe let's try just to kind of adjust that instruction just a little bit. And so I might do short words and phrases, right? So I'm teaching her something different. I'm teaching her how to use short words and phrases to be able to be more fluent. So let's see how well we do. So now, the next time, then I'm teaching her. Again, remember, that's what I'm doing if I'm working with her in the resource room, if I'm working with her in a small group, if I'm working with her in a co-teaching setting. I'm still working on those skills. And how then I start looking, and so I do see something that's happening, right? I do see an upward trend. I do see us making progress going toward that goal. So then there's my trend line. So I see an upward trend. So I know what? It's working. So whatever we're doing is working. So I can't just stop right there. I then have to say what the analysis is of that data I've collected. So not only I'm just saying it's working, but I say she had this score of 121. She had 119 and 120. So we knew that we had to change this. So we started teaching her decoding, for example. And so we were looking for words inside of words, right? So I changed my strategy. And she increased by 9 points 1 week. But then the next week, and then the week after that, we know then that her performance is trending below the aim line, but we know she's making steady progress toward our goal. So if somebody can say how much, you can tell them exact words per minute. So there's no dispute of that. You can solidly say, this is how this student's performing. This is the instructional strategy you're using, this is how they're performing, and this is on the trajectory to improvement. Now, I'm going to let you all do it, because we only have 8 minutes left, 5 minutes left, and you all can do this one on your own, okay? So, right here, we're saying when a kid is presented, so Karen, she has trouble with math and reading, and she has trouble with behavior. So Karen she's just having a little trouble. So on this sheet, I've already passed them out, they're on your table. So you'll see, these are her probes for each week. And there's one for each week, so I'm gonna put this up here. So right here, here's your first probe, there's her score. So we did it something real easy, right? We're looking at her problems, because remember we said her goal, she's gonna solve subtraction problems with an 80% accuracy on 4 consecutive tries. So we're gonna check to see, and Karen started out with a 30% accuracy. All right, so here's our probes, and we make them easy, so I can check it real quick. How many did she get right, or how many did she miss? So she missed 1, 2, 3, right? No, she only got 3 right. 1, 2, 3. So she got 30%. The next week I checked her again, she got 40. The next week she got 40. So I've got some data points now, right? I've got some data points. I've got 6. That next week she got a 50. The next week she got 60. And then the next week she got 60. So now, the third page of your handout is for you to go in there and to put that data points on that graph. And then make some kind of comment over here about what that written analysis would be. So take the data that you've got on those first 2 pages, write that in there, and then on your own make an analysis of what you think happened in that data. And I'll be ready. So y'all have got about 4 minutes, and we'll let y'all just practice. What'd you find out? How is Karen doing? Okay, so she's making progress. You know that by how?
Because she started at 30% accuracy and over 5 weeks, she's improved 60% accuracy.
That's great, right? So you real solidly know that her rate, you're looking at her rate, but you can tell how she's increasing over time. Any other questions about that? How's her trend? You can talk about her trend. What's her trend? Is it up or down? Up, right? She's got up, you talk about her trend line. You can talk about her aim line or your goal line. So where are we trying to get her to? Where are we trying to get her to? Because we said 80%, because we wrote that in our goal, right? And we said every week we're going to give her a math probe. So did we do what we said we're going to do? Yep. Is it quick and easy for us to use? Yep. Is it matched by how we calculated the baseline? Yep, if we use those same kind of tools. So it doesn't have to be anything that's so complicated. Those 10 questions for math would give us the answer, did she solve those problems correctly? Real quick, right? So it doesn't take you so much time as a teacher. But anyway, so then your analysis is correct. There's some great resources on these 2 links, and I'm gonna let you all go, to get in the taco bar line. Anybody got any questions about that? Yeah, you get in the taco line. So over there where you guys come in when we have the coffee at, that's where the tables will be set up with lunch. So go and enjoy your lunch. Our session will start back, our afternoon session will start back at 12:45. So y'all got plenty of time to eat your lunch, drink some coffee, get up and stretch your legs. Thank you all for